Sometimes when we talk about the Elder Scrolls lore and its universe, it feels like we could almost be talking about real-world history with just how deep and intricate the setting is. I know, Oblivion lore isn't real, guys. I'm still recovering from that fun fact. There are so many components in the games that make the world feel alive and real, from the people that inhabit it to the art and surroundings, and of course, the lore and background of all of these places that we get to see. In the Elder Scrolls, books are an essential part of world building. Although we as the player may often disregard the books and treat them as miscellaneous trash, their absence would not only significantly take away from that living world aspect, it would also change a lot of the things that we understand to be true about Tamriel and its people. Today we are going to explore the books of Tamriel, and why they are so integral to the overall setting in each Elder Scrolls game. Before we get started, hi, my name is Angelica, and since the game universe is based on a literal piece of literature, The Elder Scrolls, which I read all the time, by the way, I thought it would be fun to finally shed some light on this topic. So, while we are going to mainly focus on the books in the games Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim, it is worth noting that some of the books present in those games were actually present all the way back in the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall. This is a way in which I think the developers keep the worlds connected, and even if there are some discrepancies with the lore developing and changing years later, you will always have the literature and the books as a thing that kind of ties everything back together. It is also something that the player base can have in common, so for example, if you're somebody that only played up to Oblivion, you can surely bond with the Skyrim players over a masterpiece such as the lusty Argonian Maid. Weirdly enough, I feel like this is a big part of why the Elder Scrolls fanbase has such a strong community so many years later. Books are everywhere in the games, from the most lavish of mansions and castles to the deepest and most treacherous caverns and dungeons. There are a lot of lore and world implications with having books appear so frequently all over the world, but the most striking of those for me is that most of the inhabitants of the different provinces of Tamriel are literate. This speaks a lot to the sort of basic education that is given, particularly in the Empire, though little is actually known to us outside of studying magic or training to be a better warrior. You will find that books are scattered in homes of even the less privileged citizens. In a way, this also speaks to the accessibility of books in that world, but if you think about somebody who lives on the verge of poverty and maybe doesn't have a lot of food in their home, finding books is one thing that solidifies the fact that they are indeed literate, as why would they spend money on something that would be useless to them if they cannot read? An argument can be made to say that the developers treated books as miscellaneous items, a way to fill a room, and so we shouldn't really read too much into their presence in particular locations. Get it? Read? Books? But you can then also look at the kind of books that you find in specific homes. They often tell you a little bit about the person that owns them and their background. For example, the mages and scholars are interested in books related to history or magic. The Thieves Guild will have their own literature relevant to their faction, and I won't say who, but it makes sense for certain individuals to have their racy written works tucked away into the darker corners of their private quarters. With books being the main media that is consumed in this universe, owning specific works can also get you in a lot of trouble, which is highlighted in the way the books were central to some of the main questlines in the different games. Whether you can get done in for heresy or get outed as a member of a Daedra-worshipping cult responsible for murdering the Emperor, books in Tamriel have proven themselves to be powerful tools of destruction. Just as in the real world we have the dark web, the Elder Scrolls have the Tracts Perilous, or dangerous books. These include works such as the Mysterium Xarxes, which is a powerful and formidable tome written by the Daedric prince Mehrunes Dagon, or the enticing Black Books, each containing either a forbidden secret, temptation, or prize for their mortal readers. The latter is quite dangerous in particular, as those books are actually doorways to Apocrypha, the realm of the Daedric Prince of Knowledge, Hermaeus Mora. Apocrypha is no ordinary library that you can just take a stroll through, but it is a sanctuary of forbidden knowledge and memories that pose a physical threat to the mortals walking through this domain, and that's to say nothing of the realm's guardians. So what kind of books can you find in the games, aside from the ones that want to kill you or eat your soul? You have fictional stories, historical accounts, theological writings, controversial biographies, poetry, and some fun recreational texts that add a lot of flavor to the world. My personal favorites that I have read, other than The Lusty Argonian Maid and The 36 Lessons of Vivek, of course, are the real Baranzaya books. Now, I've actually covered Baranzaya and her numerous scandalous affairs on the channel before, but the most interesting thing about all of this to me is that we don't actually know the full and honest truth. You see, there is a censored version of her biography, known as the Biography of Baranzaya, and with either of the two extremes, it is unclear how much of what we know is true. It is largely up to you as the reader to decide when it comes to this obscure part of the lore, and I really enjoy having that mystery there. Another interesting fact for those of you that didn't know, the original real Baranzaya books in Daggerfall included a now censored account of an encounter with a Khajiit. If you know, you know. And interestingly enough, the new version is actually longer with other details that were added, but that specific encounter, it was censored. And just like the real Baranzaya is so much more than meets the eye, I enjoy the sense of humor that the writers had when creating these books, and sometimes when you least expect it, you could be taken on a wild ride and learn something new about the world around you. An example that comes to mind are the city guidebooks from Oblivion, so like the Guide to Breville or the Guide to Leyawiin. I will admit that in my first, second, and probably 10th playthrough, I fully ignored those books. I just didn't feel like I needed a guide to a city where I have a map and markers, so if I really needed to find something, I can, like it's not that hard. But when I finally sat down to read one of these books, it was not at all what I expected, and I immediately ran to find all of them on each of the cities to read them. You see, under the cover of being a simple guide to X cities is a series of racist, disgruntled roasts of each city in Cyrodiil, mixed with some religious shaming and finger-pointing at their godless citizens. Though there is some truth to the writings about the state of some of these cities, like Breville being an absolute dump, or Dark Grate of the sewer drain where foul and unappetizing debris collects, the writer, Alicia Otis, makes it clear that she is a giant snob who sees herself as standing far above than the less privileged members of society. She makes sure to remind the readers of the contempt she holds for the beast races in pretty much every book, and it makes sense that she also then speaks highly of people like Alicia Caro, the Countess of Leyawiin, who literally has a torture chamber for Argonians in her castle. It's not funny. What's interesting is that if you find the writer in her home in the Imperial City Temple District, she seems like a totally normal and friendly individual. Like, you'd never guess that she's the author of these so-called city guides. Because of details like this, books in the games are absolutely worth the time it takes to read them, and they also fill in a lot of gaps when you actually delve deeper and add so much to the world around you. It is worth mentioning that there are, of course, in-game benefits with reading certain books. So, for example, a book can give you a skill point when you open it, or there are spell books which give you literal spells, and sometimes even initiate a quest that you would have otherwise missed. In a way, books are part of the game mechanics, and you as the player are really encouraged to read them. Now, this wouldn't be an Angelica Tosh video if we didn't talk about the aesthetics of something. So let's start judging these books by their covers. Their literal covers. The first time we see all of these books in their physical form, in bookstores, in libraries, or scattered around the world, is in Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. In my opinion, Morrowind has some of the most beautiful in-game libraries, as the books come in all different colors, shapes, and sizes. As objects in a room, they are actually very eye-catching, since the colors tend to be rather saturated. You have a lot of bright red, green, teal, purple, some with interesting designs on them, and others opened on a page with beautifully illustrated letters. The way in which they're also different makes the libraries appear full and complete, and the bookstores are definitely some of my favorite locations in the game. In Oblivion then, we see the tradition of bright and beautiful book covers is carried on, this time with some more detailed covers. However, in Skyrim, and this is true for a lot of things in Skyrim, we are seeing more muted and neutral colors. The books still come in different sizes, the covers are different, but they are definitely less saturated colors on said covers. Even still, books in Skyrim are also some of the most eye-catching objects, especially when they are stored together in a library. So, regardless of where you are right now, Morrowind, Cyrodiil, Skyrim. Take some time to stop and read about the world that you're in. Something other than the Lusty Argonian Madebook, which I get it, it's fascinating, but trust me, there are a lot of other interesting texts and writings in the world. You just have to give them a chance. And that covers it for our Tamriel book overview. Let me know in the comments what your favorite in-game books are. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, leave a like and subscribe if you're new here. Once again, big thanks to all of the new subscribers for your support. Huge shout out to the OGs on the channel as well. I appreciate all of you, and I hope to see you in the next video. Be seeing you, bye!